Tomorrow, Randwick Racecourse will throw open its gates for another day of racing, but it's no ordinary race day. Instead, it's a farewell to Royal Randwick as we know it. Over the next 18 months, it will undergo its boldest transformation yet, a $150 million redevelopment. The plans were approved by Randwick Council months ago, but not everyone is happy. Now, in the dying hours before the wrecking balls move in, there's one last-ditch attempt to save one of Randwick's much-loved architectural treasures from demolition. Cara Meldrum-Hanna reports.
It's midday at Royal Randwick Racecourse, and there's a nervous excitement in the air. But there's no racing today. Instead, the grandstands and betting pavilions have been transformed into university exam halls. It's a far cry from the course's beginnings.
Randwick Racecourse has seen the great, the greedy and the criminal. They've all been here at the same time, sometimes perhaps sitting side by side.
The racetrack began here around 1859, 1860, and that's a good year before the Melbourne Cup was created. It's an extraordinarily long timescale for Australia. I mean, our nation has got a very, very short history, so to be able to say that we've got this course that's been here since, 1859, 1860, it's incredible.
Quickly after its inception, racing at Royal Randwick took off.
It was the national sport in Sydney, and we had, the first 5 pages of the newspapers were often dedicated to the great races or the carnivals that were coming up. It was an amazing time.
To remember the days of Randwick when he cantered down the course.
By the 1930s, Royal Randwick had become much more than just a racetrack.
That's right. During the Depression, there was the statistic that we had that the revenues generated from the tax from gambling on the racetrack actually pulled the New South Wales government through.
It was also a time when segregation ruled. Women weren't allowed to venture beyond a painted yellow line. They weren't allowed trackside and they weren't allowed to bet. Instead, their sanctuary was the Tea House, built in 1914 and designed by renowned architectural firm Robertson and Marks, the same firm that built much of the SCG.
So many beautiful events went on in that building. It was where ladies used to retire to have their tea during race days, and just look at it. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Peter Harris is a lifelong racing enthusiast and employee of the Australian Turf Club's Heritage Society, which is made up of unpaid volunteers.
It's such a rare and wonderful building in itself. It's one of the rarest few examples we have of Indian colonial architecture. It's also been here for 93 years and it's a very rich part of the history of Randwick Racecourse.
His boss doesn't agree.
I don't think the Tea House represents the history of the ATC as such.
Current generations and future generations, do you see them retiring, particularly females retiring to a tea house for tea?
No. As we were talking about before, I think they'd probably prefer to retire to the champagne bar.
And it's no secret that Royal Randwick has been in somewhat of a financial downslide for several years. Evidence of a protracted lack of funding is everywhere. A walk around the public grandstands reveals run-down gaming rooms, shabby interiors and seriously outdated amenities.
It's a tough economy to compete in. Racing, like I mentioned before, is competing with rugby league and all these other major sports in Australia. It's got low attendance. It's difficult to make a dollar in the racing industry. You just ask trainers or, owners. The outputs are very, very high. So they will do what they can to survive.
The survival of Randwick as a premier racecourse now hinges on the ability of the Australian Turf Club to rejuvenate the course. For the past 6 years, the ATC has been busy, drawing up its grand plan to breathe new life into Randwick. And this is what they've come up with. The 2 existing public stands, the paddock stand and the QE2 stand, will receive a much-needed overhaul. The biggest change? A large modern parade ring known as the Theatre of the Horse. Darren Pearce is the CEO of the ATC and the mastermind behind this bold new vision.
As a thoroughbred race club, we really are proud of the thoroughbred animal. We are proud of the horse people that we have in Sydney, the likes of Bart Cummings, Gay Waterhouse, etc. And we wanted to showcase them in a world-class way. And that's what the Theatre of the Horse does.
But this theatrical edition brings with it what many believe is a grand loss: the demolition of the historic and much-loved tea house.
We actually looked, to be honest, at a range of designs to maintain teas. We looked at going between the tea house and the stand. We looked at going around the tea house. We even looked, as crazy as it seems, going through the tea house with the horses, but none of those things allowed us to optimise the outcome for the long term.
The renovations that they're going to do are going to be incredible, and they're going to fling Randwick right back into the forefront of racing in Australia. But at what cost to history, I wonder?
And it's a wonder why the tea house was never formally heritage listed, especially considering documents like this one, obtained by 730. It's a 2006 Heritage Assessment Report carried out by heritage consultants God and Mackie Logan. It found:
the tea house is one of the oldest and most intact surviving buildings on the racecourse site. Its presence demonstrates the social customs and rituals of racegoers in the early 1900s.
The assessment concluded that the tea house was a landmark building with a high significance grading.
This was a well-known group of conservation management analysts who made that recommendation, but the ATC chose to ignore it.
Was there ever an opportunity to actually heritage list formally the tea house?
Not that I'm aware of.
But based on information in this email, written by the National Trust this week, obtained by 730, there may be more to it.
We understand that the AJC itself had nominated the tea house for listing on the State Heritage Register, but had not subsequently forwarded the necessary documentation for the listing to be completed. This building is of high heritage significance. If nominated by the AJC for State Heritage listing, approval for its demolition from Randwick City Council should not have been given. The issue seems to be very much in the hands of the AJC, who have development approval for the demolition.
Apart from seeing the CEO of the Australian Turf Club and making a last-ditch appeal to him, I don't think there's much more we can do, because really the opposition to the demolition of the tea house has started too late.
And with the wrecking ball due to swing through Randwick in less than 48 hours, the odds of a last-minute reprieve for the tea house are longer than ever.
Goodbye, the tea